Alrighty, so getting back to the situation here, I want to talk a little bit about the situation over there in Lebanon, where Lebanon, supposedly somebody in Lebanon fired some rockets over the border into Israel. And Israel, of course, shelled Lebanon in response. The rockets, basically bottle rockets. The Katyushas are kind of like, they're model rockets. You know, if you saw that show on Science Channel the other day where, big rocket ships, and they're firing these rockets up there and competition for fun. It's a hobby, model rocketry. And these things go over, and of course everybody thinks Israel really did it. So of course conveniently this group, the Abdullah Azzam Brigades, that seems to only show up when Israel needs a fall guy, and they're saying they're Al-Qaeda affiliated. Well, there's the giveaway right there. Gosh darn those Al-Qaeda. Those are evil people like, well, Adam Gadon, the American Al-Qaeda. Except his name is Adam Perlman, and his grandfather was a member of the board of directors of the ADL. Or Yusuf al-Khattab, who ran the Revolution Muslim website in the Bronx. Only his real name is Joseph Cohen. Or Amzi al-Amriki, the Muslim who terrorized South Park. Only his real name is Zachary Chesser. They're fakes. They're fakes. It's like Emmanuel Goldstein. We need a villain that we can terrorize the people with so they'll do what we tell them. Because if this Abdullah Azzam Brigades really existed, what do they think they're doing firing these bottle rockets over the border into Israel? All it's going to do is get artillery in return. It hands Israel an excuse to ignite a new invasion of Lebanon. This Abdullah Azzam Brigades has to know up front they can't inflict any damage with these little home-built rockets. It's theater. It's theater, so Israel can start a new invasion of Lebanon and grab the Litani River. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the show here, but obviously the top story today right now is Britain has their knickers in a twist. Those gosh darned Iranians stormed their embassy. How can they do that? Next thing you know, they'd be throwing tea in the harbor. So let me see if I have this really got a handle on this whole thing. The United States and Great Britain and all the West and Israel especially make up a bunch of lies about Iran's nuclear program. Say, ooh, they're doing bad things, when the only evidence that the IAEA actually has is that Iran is building a nuclear power station, which they're allowed to do legally under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In fact, the U.S. is supposed to be in there helping them build it, which strikes me as a really good way to make sure that there's nothing clandestine or underhanded about their power station, is go in and help them build the thing. And you'll know that it's just a power station. It won't be all this by guess and by gosh. But we have this laptop of death that shows up from apparently Mossad with a bunch of forged documents on it. And they say, they're building bombs. They're doing evil things. And then on the basis of these unsupported hallucinations, drug-induced delusions, I guess is a good way to phrase it, the West imposes these harsh economic sanctions on Iran on the basis of myths or lies. Let's call them what they are. You're a bad person, therefore I'm going to cripple you economically. And the people inside Iran who get upset about that, they're the bad guys? I don't think so. We know that Iran's nuclear weapons are no more real than those we were told Saddam Hussein had. We know that these economic sanctions cause great hardship within Iran. And for the Iranian people, who know they are not in the habit of invading and conquering other countries, to be subjected to punishment for something they have not done is going to anger them. I mean, just imagine for a second. You get home and your parents or your spouse say, aha, I think you have been stealing from the cookie jar or having an affair. Don't tell me you didn't. Don't deny it. I already know it's true. You can't prove a negative, therefore I'm going to just go on and assume that, yes, you've been doing bad things, and I'm canceling your allowance, or I'm taking away your car keys, or I'm canceling your credit card, or whatever it's going to be. would you just say, okay, yeah, go ahead, punish me, even though I know I didn't actually do anything? If you go along with that, man, you are a pussy. If you accept being punished for something you have not actually done, then you are a milquetoast. And the Iranians are understandably angry because they know the government of the United States and Great Britain were lying about Saddam's nuclear weapons, and they know the governments of the United States and Great Britain are lying about Iran's nuclear weapons. They don't exist. Iran is being punished for something they did not do. Of course they're going to be angry, and of course they're going to strike back, and of course they're going to express their displeasure. Wouldn't you? So they're out there doing their thing, and they basically took over the embassies, and they held a couple of people for a little while who showed typical British stiff upper lip thing by crying and saying, please don't hurt us, we didn't mean it. And they burned the flag. And the Iranian authorities would come in and clear them out and restored peace and everything, but the U.S. and Great Britain are saying, they can't do that. They have to understand that when we lie about their nuclear program and impose crushing financial penalties on them on the basis of these lies, that's just the way it works. Because we have a flag and we have God on our side. And they just have to go along with it because that is the way the world works. And the Iranians, of course, are thinking something very differently, in which is, if we do something bad, yeah, go ahead and punish us for it. But if we haven't done anything, don't punish us for things we have not done. I'm sure that everybody listening to the show at some time in their life got blamed for something they didn't actually do. That they're completely innocent, somebody framed you, or there was somebody jumped to a conclusion, and you got to catch the flack for something you did not do. How did you feel about that? Was that easy to accept? Were you able to just say, oh, well, that's just the way these things happen. I didn't really need that allowance after all. That's what Iran is going through right now. They are being punished for something they have not done. They have been accused, falsely accused, of engaging activities that are not covered by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And they are understandably angry. They're right to be angry about this. And so don't let the corporate media here in this country say, they're wrong to strike back when we treat them unjustly. Because that's exactly what it is. The Iranian students are doing exactly what the students in Wall Street are doing. They're fighting back against injustice. They're fighting back against fraud. They're fighting back against dishonest money junkies who are already drooling about the riches of Iran they're going to divide up after the invasion is all over. So I'm frankly surprised it took this long for the students to basically get upset over there in Iran. And yes, they should dump some of that British tea in the harbor. Now, we're following very, very closely this National Defense Authorization Act for 2012 and the provisions within it which allow the president to have the military arrest American citizens on American soil and lock them up on the mere suspicion they're engaging in terroristic activity. What's terroristic activity? Well, one of the definitions is if you question the wars, that makes you a terrorist suspect. We're at the gulag phase here. There was an attempt to attach an amendment to the bill, the Udall-Webb amendment, that would have stripped out those provisions. That failed. The Senate voted that amendment down and said, yes, we want to be able to lock up Americans we don't like. Without a trial, without a charge, without a lawyer, without a Bill of Rights, all of that nonsense, that gosh darn piece of paper. We can live without that. Things would be a heck of a lot easier in this country if it was a dictatorship, as long as we're the dictators. Where did we all hear that one before?
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator.
Good old W there. We're not laughing anymore because we're there. We're there. Now, one of the ringers in these aspects of this bill, one of the provisions in there is the one that institutes restrictions on the transfer of cleared Guantanamo detainees. In other words, we're in this situation where the government wants to maintain the right to keep these people locked up in Guantanamo even if the military tribunals, the kangaroo court, can't find that they did anything wrong. They still want to keep them locked up. Why? Well, the fear is that after years of torture at the hands of Americans, they might not like us when they're released. Of course, we know what the real issue is. We know because of one gentleman who was released, Binyan Mohammed, who went public. He was released on a promise of staying silent. He broke that promise. Good for him. He's a whistleblower. We know that those people in Guantanamo have had far worse things done to them than just waterboarding. Binyan Mohammed's body has the scars to prove it. We know people have died from what is being done to them in these American dungeons, these American gulags, the stalags. That's why they don't want the Guantanamo inmates to be released, even if they're completely innocent. Doesn't matter if they're innocent anymore. They are walking testimonials to the brutality and cruelty of the United States government. Now, Rand Paul is going to try another attempt to kill the indefinite detention provision of the bill, and he's not going to touch these others. And maybe if they're not tinkering with this one about we got to keep the Guantanamo detainees locked up forever, even if they're innocent, because it'll make us look bad if they get out there, he may have another shot at it. We'll see what's going on that. Personally, I don't think this indefinite detention provision can pass a constitutional test. And one of the reasons I don't think it can is because in order for this to be legal under U.S. law and under international law, the U.S. government has to technically declare the people of the United States of America an enemy in time of war, at which point all of the Geneva Accords come into play, and international observers have to be brought in and keep an eye on things, like the Red Cross. So this is a really, really complicated mess, and a lot of people are very, very worried. The government has just hit the panic button. They want to lock us all up. They can't stand the fact we're talking to each other. We'll be right back.
Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I want to respond to that thing that we just heard in the news break where Obama's up there saying Iran's international obligations and diplomacy and protecting blah, 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 which is their way of, like, not mentioning the fact that the U.S. government and Great Britain's government are trying to economically crush Iran over weapons of mass destruction that don't exist. Iran's building a power station. They're allowed to do that. They signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, so did the United States of America. The U.S. is in treaty violation here. But I want to make a point here, just to show you how completely out of control and wacko the corporate media and the federal government of the United States happen to be. Iran expelled the British ambassador. It's not an embassy anymore. It's a rented building with some British nationals in it, but it's technically not an embassy anymore. So Iran is not actually under any kind of international diplomatic obligation to protect the people in there, over and above the normal keeping of order in the city of Tehran, which they did. They went in and they got the protesters out of there. I mean, for Obama to go out there screaming about international obligations when he is head of the country that is in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is absurd. This is why they want you dumbed down and unable to think for yourself. So that when the media says Iran is bad, you'll say, yes, Iran must be bad. I must send my children to kill them. And you don't realize that the bad guys in this whole situation are everybody but Iran. Since Iran became an Islamic Republic in 1979, how many other countries have they attacked and invaded and tried to conquer? It's a trick question. They haven't. Period. End of discussion. Look at how many attacks and invasions and bombings Israel and the United States have carried out in that same interval of time. Iran is not the problem here, and Iran has every right to peaceful uses of nuclear technology because they signed the international agreement. And if you want to talk about international obligations that are not being honored, then let's look at Article 4 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which obligates the United States of America to help Iran build its power stations. And if the United States was in there helping to build the power stations, they would know for a fact there's no bomb factory under it. Just like there was no bomb factory underneath the power station at Osirik that Israel bombed saying, ooh, they got bombs, they got bombs. The only reactor with a bomb factory hidden underneath it is at Dimona. And even Israel's own media is now admitting that.